This is a reading of the Canterbury Tales in the modern English translation. When April with its sweet-smelling showers hath pierced the drought of March to the root, and bathed every vein of the plant in such liquid, by which power the flower is created, when the west wind also with its sweet breath, and every wood and field has breathed life into, the tender new leaves, and the young sun has run half its course in Aries, and small fowls make melody, those that sleep the night with open eyes, so nature incites them in their hearts. Then folk long to go on pilgrimages, and professional pilgrims to seek foreign shores, to distant shrines known in various lands, and specially from every shire's end, of England to Canterbury they travel, to seek the holy blessed martyr who helped them when they were sick. It happened that in that season one day, in Southwark, at the tabard of the inn as I lay, ready to go on my pilgrimage to Canterbury with a very devout spirit, at night had come into that hostelry, well 29 in a company, of various sorts of people, by chance fallen, in fellowship. They were all pilgrims, who intended to ride toward Canterbury. The bedrooms and the stables were spacious. We were well accommodated in the best way. And in brief, when the sun was gone to rest, I had so spoken with every one of them, that I was of their fellowship straightway, and made agreement to rise early, to take our way where I will tell you. But nonetheless, while I have time and opportunity, before I proceed further in this tale, it seems to me in accord with reason to tell you all the circumstances of each of them, as it seemed to me, and who they were, and of what social rank, and of what clothing they were in. And at a night, then I will first begin. A knight there was, and that one was a worthy man, who from the time that he first began to ride out, he loved chivalry, fidelity, and good reputation, generosity and courtesy. He was very worthy in his lord's war, and for that he had ridden no man further, as well in Christendom as in heathen lands, and was ever honored for his worthiness. He was at Alexandria when it was won. He had sat very many times in place of honor. Above knights of all nations in Prussia, he had campaigned in Lithuania and in Russia. No Christian man of his rank so often. Also, he had been in Granada at the siege of Algericus, and had ridden to Morocco. He was in Ayash and Anatolia when they were won, and in the Mediterranean. He had been at many a noble expedition. He had been at 15 mortal battles, and fought for faith at Tlemcen 3 times in formal duels, and each time slain his foe. This same worthy knight had also been at one time with the Lord of Balat against another heathen in Turkey, and evermore he had astounding reputation. Although he was brave, he was also prudent, and of this his deportment, as meek as is a maid, he never yet said any rude word in all his life unto any sort of person. He was truly perfect, noble knight. But to tell you of his clothing, his horses were good, but he was not gaily dressed. He wore a tunic of coarse cloth, all stained with rust by his coat of mail. For he was recently come back from his expedition, and went to do his pilgrimage. With him there was a son, a young squire, a lover and a lively bachelor, with locks curled as if they had been laid in a curler. He was 20 years of age, I guess. Of his stature he was of moderate height, and wonderfully agile, of great strength. And he had been for a time on cavalry expedition, in Flanders, in Artois, and Picardy, and conducted himself well for so little space of time, in hopes to stand in his good lady's good graces. He was embroidered as if it were a mead, all full of fresh flowers, white and red. Singing he was, or fluting, all the day. He was fresh as is the month of May. His gown was short, with long and wide sleeves. He knew well how to sit on horse and handsomely ride. He knew how to make songs and well compose the words. Joust and also dance, as well draw and write. He loved so passionately that at night time he slept no more than does a nightingale. Courteous he was, humble and willing to serve, and carved before his father at the table. A yeoman, he the knight had a yeoman no more and no more servants. At that time, for it pleased him to travel, so, and he, the yeoman, was clad in coat and hood of green, a sheaf of peacock arrows, bright and keen. He carried under his belt very properly. He knew well how to care for his equipment as a yeoman should. His arrows did not fall short because of drooping feathers, and in his hand he carried a mighty bow. He had a close-cropped head with a brown face. He knew well all the practice of woodcraft. He wore an elegant archer's wrist guard upon his arm, and by his side a sword and small shield. And on that other side an elegant dagger, well ornamented and sharp as the point of the spear, a Christopher medal of bright silver on his breast. He carried a horn, the shoulder strap was green. He was a forester, truly, as I guess. There was also a nun, prioress, who was very simple and modest in her smiling. Her greatest oath was but by Saint Loy, and she was called Madame Eglantine. She sang the divine service very well, intoned in her nose in a very polite manner, and she spoke French very well and elegantly, and in the manner of Stratford at the bow, for French of Paris was to her unknown. At meals she was well taught indeed. She let no morsel fall from her lips, nor wet her fingers deep in her sauce. She knew well how to carry a morsel to her mouth, and take good care that no drop fell upon her breast. Her greatest pleasure was in good manners. She wiped her upper lip so clean that in her cup there was seen no tiny bit of grease. When she had drunk her drink, she reached for her food in a very seemly manner, and surely she was of excellent deportment, and very pleasant and amiable in demeanor. She took pains to imitate the manners of court, and to be dignified in behavior, and to be considered worthy of reverence. But to speak of her moral sense, she was so charitable and so compassionate that she would weep if she saw a mouse caught in a trap as if it were dead or bled. She had some small sounds that she fed, with roasted meat or milk or fine white bread. But sorely she wept if one of them were dead, or if someone smote it smartly with a stick. And all was feeling and tender heart. Her wimple was pleated in a very seemly manner, her nose well formed, her eyes grey as glass, her mouth very small, and moreover soft and red. But surely she had a fair forehead. It was almost 9 inches broad, I believe, for certainly she was not undergrown. Her cloak was very well made, as I was aware. About her arm she bore of small coral a set of beads adorned with large green beads, and thereon hung a brooch of very bright gold, on which there was written an A with a crown, and after, love conquers all. And she had another nun with her, who was her secretary, and 3 priests. There was a monk, extremely fine one, an outrider, a monk with business outside the monastery, who loved hunting. A virile man, qualified to be an abbot. He had very many fine horses in his stable, and when he rode, one could hear his bridle jingle in a whistling wind as clear and also as loud as does the little chapel bell. Where this lord was prior of the subordinate monastery, the rule of St. Maurice or of St. Benedict, because it was old and somewhat strict, this same monk let old things pass away, and follow the broader customs of modern times. He gave not a plucked hen from that text that says that hunters are not holy men, nor that a monk, when he is heedless of rules, is like a fish that is out of water. That is to say, a monk out of his cloister. But he considered that same text not worth an oyster, and I said his opinion was good. Why should he study and make himself crazy? Always to pore upon the book in the cloister, or work with his hands and labor. As Augustine commands, how shall the world be served? Let Augustine have his work reserved to him. Therefore he was indeed a vigorous horseman. He had greyhounds as swift as fowl in flight, of tracking and of hunting for the hare. It was all his pleasure, by no means would he refrain from it. I saw his sleeves lined at the hand with squirrel fur and all the finest in the land. To fasten his hood under his chin he had very skilfully made pin of gold. There was an elaborate knot in the larger end. His head was bald and shone like any glass, and his face did too, as if he had been rubbed with oil. He was very plump and in good condition. His eyes were prominent and rolling in his head, which seemed like a furnace under a cauldron. His boots supple, his horse in excellent condition. Now certainly he was handsome ecclesiastical dignitary. He was not pale as a tormented spirit. A fat swan loved he best of any roast. His saddle horse was as brown as a berry. There was a friar, a pleasure-loving and merry one, a limiter within assigned territory, a very solemn man, and in all the four orders of friars is that no one knows, so much sociability and elegant speech he had made very many a marriage. Of young women at his own cost, he was a noble supplier of his order, very well beloved, and familiar was he with landowners everywhere in this country, and also with worthy women of the town, for he had the power of confession. As he said himself, more than a parish priest, for he was licensed by his order. He heard confession very sweetly, and his absolution was pleasant. He was a lenient man in giving penance. Where he knew he would give a good gift, for to give a poor order of friars is a sign that a man is not well confessed. For if he, the friar, dared to assert, he knew that a man was repentant. For many a man is so hard in his heart, he cannot weep although he painfully suffers. Therefore, instead of weeping in prayers, one may give silver to the poor friars. His hood was always stuffed full of knives and pins to give fair wives. And certainly he had a merry voice. He knew well how to sing and play on a rote. he absolutely took the prize for reciting ballads. His neck was white as a lily flower. Therefore, he was a strong champion fighter. He knew the taverns well in every town, and every innkeeper and barmaid, better than a leper or a beggar woman. For to such a worthy man as he, it was not suitable, in view of his official position, to have acquaintance with sick lepers. It is not respectable, cannot be profitable to deal with any such poor people. But all with rich people and sellers of victuals, and everywhere where profit should arise. He was courteous and graciously humble. There was no man anywhere so capable such work, and he was the best beggar in his house. And he gave a certain fee for his grant of begging rights. None of his brethren came there in his territory. For though a widow had not a shoe, so pleasant was his in the beginning, yet he would have a farthing before he went away. His total profit was much more than his proper income, and he knew how to frolic as if he were indeed a pup. He knew how to be much help on days for resolving disputes, for there was not like a cloistered monk with threadbare cope like a poor scholar. But he was a master of arts, or a pope. Of wide, expensive cloth was his short cloak, which was round as a bell fresh from the clothes-press. Somewhat he lisped for his affectation, to make his English sweet upon his tongue, and in his harping when he had sung. His eyes twinkled in his head exactly, as do the stars in the frosty night. This worthy friar was called Hubert.